Here are 3 reasons why our drug laws really have to change. Number 1, the drug laws don't reflect reality, and they make everything more dangerous. This is sort of easy to see if you think about the fact that alcohol causes cancer. Tobacco, smoking causes cancer. Ecstasy doesn't cause cancer, right? So the idea that the drugs that cause cancer are legal and you've got a drug that doesn't cause cancer that's not, that's creating more danger. Now, I know what some of you are thinking when you hear the word drugs. You're thinking addictions and overdoses. You're thinking that's dangerous, right? All of the danger of overdose, or at least most of it, is really the result of quality control problems. And so that element of the danger that's associated with the idea of drug use can be eliminated by regulation. So whether that quality control problem is people getting doses that are 4 times too high, which is what is happening with fentanyl. The problem with the drug is that it's so potent that when people get the fake OxyContin pills, when people get the fentanyl, the single dose of fentanyl is sometimes 4 times too strong, and that's why people die. And the drug is so potent that the people who prepare it have no hope of preparing equal doses. Now, regulation can eliminate this problem basically 100%. They can standardize the doses so that never happens. And actually, fentanyl isn't really the most ideal opioid for recreational opioid users to be using anyway. And as you can imagine, the recreational opioid users are not a fussy bunch, right? So they would be very happy to accept an opioid that has much better characteristics for safe recreational use. And additionally, regulation could mean that we put all of the opioid users into supervised consumption facilities for their opioid use. And that really does eliminate the rest of the overdose potential for the opioid drug, leaving only the problem of addiction, which is already there. And regarding the problem of addiction, the chances of recovery and getting people into a recovery program, assessed, psychological counseling, whatever, the opportunities for that only get better once we've got people into a supervised consumption facility. Now, obviously, the money to pay for any of that could come from taxing the sale of drugs, but I want to come back to that point in a little bit. Fentanyl and opioids in general are a fairly extreme form of drug use. And so there's lots of drug use that isn't in that category of danger or addiction potential. So drugs like magic mushrooms or MDMA, which is also known as ecstasy, or cannabis, are in the category of drugs that are relatively safe to use. Arguably they're much safer to use than alcohol. And so there are some caveats to that, of course. You wouldn't want somebody driving a car on magic mushrooms, but you wouldn't want somebody driving a car on an intoxicating dose of alcohol either. Now, you may have heard of MDMA fatalities, or they might have been called overdoses. That's usually not what's going on. Often with MDMA, what's occurring is that a person has either received a substitute drug like PMA, which causes a much higher frequency of bad reactions, or they have a suspected metabolic sensitivity to the MDMA, which is a rare occurrence that some very small fraction of people, just as some very small fraction of people can have a bad reaction to the birth control pill, there are people who can have a bad reaction to MDMA due to their biological constitution. But try to remember that this doesn't prevent MDMA from being used in post-traumatic stress disorder trials And before MDMA was illegal, it didn't prevent psychologists in California from administering it to their patients as well. So it's a fairly rare phenomenon, and of course, with regulation and proper incorporation into the medical system, that type of thing could be checked for. So even the type of overdose reactions that occur with ecstasy, which are very infrequent and rare, even those types of reactions can also be compensated for and eliminated by a system of regulation. So whether it's a relatively safe drug like ecstasy or a much more dangerous drug like an opioid, the drugs only get safer under a regulated system. And so if the point of having drug regulations is to try to save lives, and I think it is, then it only makes sense to exert more control over what drug users are taking and how they're taking it by regulating the drugs that they're taking, and in some circumstances putting that consumption into supervised consumption facilities. Now, the second reason that we should really change our drug laws is the money. So right now we've got who knows how much money going into the hands of criminal organizations, right? And so all of that money could be going into the government coffers to pay for whatever types of drug recovery programs that we need. I mean, right now all of the money for drug recovery comes out of public funds, and the people who sell the drugs don't even pay taxes. Does that make any sense? No, of course it doesn't. What makes sense is to take the profits from the drugs, or at least as much of those profits as we need, because they're huge. You have to remember that, or it's important to understand just how big drug profits are. The recreational drug market is worth $0.5 trillion a year globally. It's one of the most valuable commodities on the planet. So there's huge profits in drugs. And so the idea that, the government is struggling to find money to pay for drug rehabilitation programs is absurd. All the money that we need is there's money for that, and there's money for a lot more public good stuff. I mean, why shouldn't the drug users who are paying for their drugs, and I'm not talking just about opioid users who might be in a bad way, but I mean, weekend partiers who are out popping pills of ecstasy or smoking cannabis, eating shrooms, whatever. Why shouldn't those people be contributing to the public good by putting some of that money into the government coffers? I think obviously that's what should be happening. And of course the alternative is that the money goes into the hands of people who aren't always bad people, but in some cases, and if you look at a country like Mexico, they've got some very serious problems with the criminal organizations having generated so much wealth and power that they're actually able to assassinate politicians. You don't want that to come to the rest of the world. And the profit margins with fentanyl are so extraordinary, truly extraordinary. I mean, it's like $10,000 worth of internet bought fentanyl is worth $15 million on the street in North America. So you're talking about like multi-million dollar profits from that, which have never existed before. Heroin was never worth that much. If you look it up, you can find these figures available online. But if you look it up, heroin is worth, you can sort of double your money with heroin. And with fentanyl, you can basically increase your money by 1,000-fold. So anyway, enough about the money. Let's get on to the third reason that drugs should really be regulated and our drug laws completely changed. And that is that some of the drugs that are currently illegal have benefits. So drugs like magic mushrooms or MDMA, also known as ecstasy. I mean, there's a lot of people who take these drugs and they say that they have improved their life in some way. You know, you never hear about anybody saying that drinking alcohol made me a better person, or smoking cigarettes really allowed me to make some breakthroughs or get some insight into my life. That doesn't occur. But you do hear those stories when people are talking about using drugs like MDMA and magic mushrooms. And so there's an argument that the benefit of these drugs is in itself a reason to liberate them from prohibition. That is my friend Master Cody down here on the ground. Where are you, Master Cody? Jeez, this thing is hard to maneuver. That is my friend Master Cody down there on the ground. He's helping me pace my video every time I need to stop and take a pause. Master Cody asked me to throw the ball for him, and so I'm going to get back to doing that. But anyway, these are the 3 reasons why we should definitely change the drug laws right away. Oh, and one more thing. If you're thinking that maybe regulating drugs and making them legally available for the users with regulations is going to increase the rates of drug use, if that's what your concern is, it's not. That didn't happen in Portugal. In Portugal, they decriminalized drug use. The rates went down. All the rates except for, I think, LSD. So heroin rates went down, cocaine rates went down, but LSD rates went up a little bit. But what's really spectacular is that the rates of drug overdose deaths in Portugal, those plummeted by 75%. And you can consider why that might be, but the fact is that they decriminalized drugs, the rates went down, and fear of the illegality of drugs does not prevent people from using drugs. You know, it just doesn't. Okay, see you later.